Chapter 1. April watches the medics carry her father in a cadaver bag. "Please don't be real. Please don't be real," she silently prayed as she stared at the ambulance in front of her house, tears rolling down her face. It shouldn't have been him in that bag. It should have been me, she thought to herself as tears flooded down her face. She stood there while the ambulance left, and her neighbor also entered their houses, leaving her to her own thoughts. She looked down at her blood-filled hands, feeling nothing but pain, as she knew whose blood it was. Her father's blood. She opened the door and ran inside to the bathroom, scrubbing her hands under the running water, trying to get the blood stain from her hand. The image of blood gushing out of her father's stomach resurfaced in her memory. Ouch! She let out a scream as she injured herself. There was still a faint color of blood in her hands, but she switched off the tap and took a towel, cleaning it on the way out of the bathroom. She closed the door and headed to the bedroom when she felt a presence in the room with her. She turned and saw a tall man in her room, blood pouring from his forehead, and she screamed. The man lunged forward and covered her mouth to muffle her scream. April bit hard on his fingers and limped to the door to call for help, but the man was fast to catch her and slam her against the wall. "Stay put and shut off," the man snapped at her, and April started crying. "Please, don't kill me, please." Fear took over April's body as she stared into the green eyes of the stranger. "Just keep quiet," he snapped at her. He held his stomach in pain and turned to her. "Do you know how to stitch?" he asked April, who was shaking in her heels. She had been through a lot this night for another drama. "No, I can't," she said. "You will stitch me up now," the man said, leaving no room for any discussion. He dropped a bag. April didn't realize he was holding it on the table. "Open it. Everything you need is there." April slowly took the bag and opened it. It was a stitching kit and a small bottle of alcohol. The man slumped on the chair and lifted his shirt, making April's eyes widen in horror. There was a deep cut on his chest and blood was gushing out of it. How is he not dead? April thought as she examined the wound. "Come on, get to work." The man snarled and April stumbled to take a step back. She didn't know what to do, and she couldn't do what he asked her to do at the same time. She had never stitched someone. Maybe dress a wound, but not stitch one. "Can I use my phone?" April managed to ask, her voice shaking. "Use whatever you want," he said, and April immediately took her phone, which she dropped on the floor after calling the ambulance. She thought of calling 911 immediately. She held her phone, but the sight of blood gushing out of the man's chest and forehead made her hesitant. It was enough death for a day. She didn't want someone else to die. She then scrolled and looked for instructions on how to stitch. Getting a video of one, she got to work. A little bit of groans and growls came from the man as she stitched him up, but not a cry. After she was done, she stepped away from him while he drank the alcohol he brought in the bag. After he was done, his eyes landed back on her, and April took another step back from him. "Give me a clean shirt," he ordered, and April went inside to take off her father's shirt and gave it to him. "Good," he said, buttoning the buttons and heading to the door when he stopped and talked to her. "What do you want?" he asked, taking April back. "Huh?" she asked in confusion. "Humans?" he groaned before asking her again. "What is the only thing you want badly in your world?" "My father. I want him alive," she said, still confused, but that was the only thing she wanted most in the world. The man chuckled. "You greedy fellow. Your father is dead. He can't come back to life," he said, making what April knew more true. "I know, but I can't help but hope a miracle can happen. He is everything I have," April said as a tear escaped from her eyes. "Oh dear. Humans with tears, I can't do that for you, so bye, human," he said, reaching for the door. "I know. Only God can bring him back to life, and you are no God," April said, already back in her thoughts as she sat in the chair the man was in before. The man turned to her, his eyes burning in anger. Consider your dad alive. Give me his name, April, absent-minded, replied to him. John Davis. That is my father's name. You owe me one, the man said, and opened the door. April looked at him and asked, I am April. What is your name? I am the devil, he said, and disappeared into the night. Devil? What an ironic name, April thought before she started crying. Chapter 2. The hospital doors slid open with a mechanical hiss as April stepped inside, the early morning air still clinging to her skin. She adjusted the strap of her leather bag over her shoulder. She was wearing crisp beige trousers and a white blouse tucked neatly for a professional look. The scent of antiseptic filled the air as nurses moved quickly down the corridor. Monitors beeped faintly in distant rooms, and fluorescent lights cast a pale glow across the polished floors. Good morning, doctor, a nurse said, hurrying toward her with a file clutched tightly to her chest. There are patients waiting in the pediatric ward. We haven't been able to reach the other doctors, and we are short-staffed today. April exhaled softly. Just a way to start the week, she murmured under her breath. Dr. April, there you are, a familiar voice called, and she turned to the person. A young man approached her with an easy smile, hands tucked casually into his coat pockets. His sandy blonde hair was slightly messy, and his hazel eyes sparkled with mischief. I will be there shortly, April told the nurse gently, and the nurse nodded before hurrying away to find other doctors to help. The young man stopped in front of her, studying her face. So, he said, wriggling his eyebrows playfully, and April raised her eyebrows in question. Did you have a wonderful night with your fiancé? He asked. April rolled her eyes, but couldn't suppress her smile. Her fingers subconsciously brushed the engagement ring on her left hand, which felt heavy on her fingers. Since Adam slipped the ring down her fingers, she was still getting used to it. Yes, I did. And it's all thanks to you. I did nothing, he said dramatically. I simply assisted in planning the greatest proposal in modern history. She laughed softly. Assisted? You practically orchestrated the whole thing, Matthew. Well, he leaned closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Someone had to make sure he didn't mess it up. April shook her head, still smiling. For a moment, everything felt safe, until the door burst open with a stretcher wheeled in a hurry. We need a doctor, someone screamed, and forgetting she was having a discussion with Matthew, April limped forward and went to the man being wheeled in. Knife protruded from his chest, crimson soaking through his shirt, dripping onto the white sheets. She looked at him and found him in a pool of blood with a knife protruding from his chest, crimson soaking through his shirt, dripping into the white sheets. A sense of déjà vu hit April like a blow, and she took a step back as the nurses pushed him to the emergency unit. It was just like that night, just like the man in whom I stitched years ago. He called himself Devil, April said out loud, still trying to fathom what she saw, when a cold sensation crawled down her spine. April, are you coming? Matthew called while she rushed along with the nurses wheeling the unconscious man. She snapped back to reality and followed after. She stopped by her office, took her coat, and put it on the way. A nurse handed her a pair of gloves before entering the room. BP is dropping, a nurse said immediately she entered. Where's the trauma cart? Move, move. April stepped in immediately, pushing past the noise. On my count, she said calmly. We stabilize first. The man on the stretcher was barely conscious. Blood soaked through his shirt, pooling beneath him. A knife protruded from his chest at a brutal angle. The sight made her stomach tighten. It was the angle, the same location, just like that night. And she knew because she stitched it up. Her throat went dry as she stared at it. Doctor? A nurse urged, and April blinked, forcing her focus back. Prep for removal. Suction ready. She then snapped her gloves into place. As her fingers wrapped around the handle of the knife, a strange coldness brushed against her skin, fleeting. Her heart skipped. She shook her head. No, it's just stress. She thought it herself. She removed the knife swiftly and blood flowed out. After what felt like an eternity, the patient was stabilized and the tension in the room eased. April sighed in relief and stepped back, peeling off her gloves slowly as she left the room. But she still had an uneasy feeling. It must be because I didn't eat this morning, she thought to herself, but she knew that wasn't it. She most times skipped breakfast, and she was always okay. She brushed it off and spent the whole day attending to patients. When it was time to get out of work, a nurse approached her as she was about to reach the hospital door. Dr. April, she heard her voice and groaned to herself. Not again, she turned to the nurse, offering a weak smile despite how tired she was. I know you are tired and I won't take much of your time, the nurse said, and April nodded. There is a doctor on transfer. Administration says he will start tomorrow, and you are in charge of him. April frowned. Why do I need to do that? The head nurse does that. You were specifically asked to do it. He transferred from New York, and he will resume by 9 tomorrow morning. April nodded, accepting to get the new doctor accustomed to his new place of work tomorrow, knowing she had to choose, then to do it. See you tomorrow, April said before pushing the hospital door open. Chapter 3. The next morning, April arrived earlier than usual. She told herself it was because she had orientation duties, not because she barely slept. She was going over a list of people she would send invites to for her wedding, and since she couldn't sleep, she decided to do something useful. The nurses were already moving around with clipboards and attending to patients as usual. Normal. Everything was normal. Someone is glowing, Matthew's voice teased from behind her. She didn't turn. Don't start, she said while she continued walking. Oh no, I will start, he said, catching up to her and walking by her side. Engaged life looks good on you, Dr. April. She rolled her eyes but smiled slightly. Go do your job, Matthew. I am doing my job. Morale support, Matthew said, grinning. That was his favorite thing to do in the morning, teasing April. She was easy to tease, and she makes working in a place as draining as the hospital fun for him. She was about to reply to him when a nurse approached. Dr. April, the new transfer is here. Her stomach tightened instantly. That was fast, Matthew muttered. I thought there were no new transfers until month ending. April straightened unconsciously and asked, Where is he? In your office. Her steps felt heavier as she walked down the hallway. She had never oriented a new transfer before. Her every step towards her office made her pulse tick. This is ridiculous, she told herself. He's just a doctor. She reached her office door and hesitated for a second before pushing the door open. A man stood near her desk, his back to her as his attention was on something he was holding. Her eyes fell to her table, where the portrait picture of her dad and her was missing. She knew instantly that that was what was in his hands. He had broad shoulders beneath a crisp white shirt, black trousers, a lab coat draped neatly over his arm. He looked composed and fit. As if sensing her presence, he turned to the door. Their eyes met, and the air in the room changed. Ice green eyes, raging, mischief. Her breath caught as she found it surprising. It was so familiar to her. She tried placing the eyes to whom she knew, but she couldn't. It was like she knew who they were, but she couldn't remember. The doctor studied her face slowly, carefully, like he was confirming something. Then he gave a small, sweet smile. Dr. April, he said smoothly. Her name sounded different in his mouth. It was familiar. She felt it then, that uneasy feeling. He extended his hand. Dr. Lucien Vale, I believe you're in charge of my orientation. His voice was steady and professional. his eyes never leaving hers. Then she placed her hands in his, shaking him. "Welcome to San Francisco." "Thank you," he replied smoothly, his smile still in place. "I've heard good things about this hospital." Their hands separated, and April stepped around her desk, reclaiming her space. She gently took the portrait from his hand and placed it back where it belonged. "My father," she said shortly. "He is one strong man." Lucian's gaze shifted briefly to the photo before returning to her. "I can see the resemblance," he said. "He looks like a fighter." "Oh yes, he is. Not that he is a fighter in an actual work," she said. "I see," he said with a smile. Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten. She cleared her throat. "I'll give you a tour. The emergency department is our busiest unit. We don't get slow days." "I don't mind being busy," he replied. "I prefer it." "Of course you do," she thought, as they both stepped out of the office together. Nurses glanced up as they passed. Matthew, standing by the nurses' station, noticed immediately and walked over. "So this is the famous transfer," Matthew said casually, offering his hand. "Matthew Collins." Lucien shook it. "Lucien Vale." Matthew studied him for half a second too long, the way men do when measuring another man. "Hope you're ready," Matthew added lightly. "She runs this place like a dictator." April shot him a look. "Ignore him. I don't know what he is talking about." Lucian's lips curved slightly. "I prefer strong leadership." April began explaining protocols, patient intake flow, trauma response hierarchy, and Lucien listened carefully, asked the right questions, intelligent ones. As they entered the emergency unit, a nurse rushed toward them. "Car accident incoming. 2 patients, 2 minutes out." April shifted instantly into doctor mode. "Prep trauma room 1. She turned to Lucien. "You can observe for today." He tilted his head slightly. "Of course, April," he said. "Of course." But April didn't hear him as she started, preparing to treat the incoming wounded patients. Chapter 4. April barely looked up when the second patient stabilized. She stepped back from the bed, peeled off her gloves, and disposed of them. She handed the chart to the nurse with her before walking out of the trauma room. Matthew was waiting outside for her, leaning on the wall with his arms folded. "Both of them?" he asked. "Both of them," she confirmed. He let out a breath. "You ate this morning, right? Because you've been running since 7. "I'm fine, Matthew," April said, but she wasn't looking at him. She was looking past him down the corridor to where Lucien stood outside an office, talking to one of the nurses. He was listening more than he was speaking, which she'd noticed was something he did often. The nurse laughed at something he said. "He settled in fast," Matthew muttered, following her gaze. "That's a good thing," April said. "Is it?" Matthew asked. She looked at him. "Yes, Matthew, it is. Go do your rounds." She walked toward her office, and Lucien turned and followed her, giving the nurse a small nod before falling in step beside April. "You were good in there," he said. "I told you to observe," April said as they got to her office door. "I observed from outside. You had it under control." He held the door for her. "The first patient's pressure dropped twice before you even touched him. You predicted both drops." April went behind her desk and sat down, opening a file. "It was from experience, not prediction." "If you say so," Lucien said. There was something in the way he said it that made her look up. He was standing at the edge of her desk, looking at the portrait of her and her father, the same way he had when she entered the room and saw him holding it. "You keep looking at that," April said. He glanced at her. "Sorry." "Don't apologize, I'm asking why." He paused, then picked up a pen from her desk and set it back down, a small gesture that felt like he was buying time. "He looks healthy," Lucien said finally. "Your father." He looks like a man who hasn't been sick a day in his life. April looked at the photo and her gaze softened. He almost didn't make it once, she said. A long time ago, but he pulled through. She closed the file in front of her. He's one of the strongest people I know. Lucien said nothing this time. He only looked at her. But something shifted in his expression, something that was gone before she could name it. I'll do afternoon rounds now, he said, clearing his throat. Unless you need me here. You know the floors already. You don't need me to hold your hand anymore. The corner of his mouth moved, but not quite a smile. Noted, he said, and left her office. April sat for a moment after he was gone, looking at the door he closed as he went out before shifting her gaze. She looked at her father's photo. Then she picked up her pen and went back to work. Chapter 5. The wedding date was set for the 14th of March. April had the invitations printed on a Wednesday afternoon and spent her lunch break signing them at her desk. 215 names. Family, old friends, and colleagues. She added Lucien Vale to the list without thinking twice. She told herself it was because it would be awkward not to. He was part of the team now. Everyone else in the hospital was invited. It meant nothing. She sealed his envelope and moved on with the rest. Over dinner that evening, she told Adam about the new transfer. Adam was a lawyer with kind eyes and a good laugh, and he listened the way he always did, attentively, asking the right questions. That was one of the things she loved about him. Is he good? Adam asked. The new doctor? Very, she said. Cardiothoracic background, and he's sharp and attentive, April said, nodding. That's good for the hospital, he commented. Yes, April sighed. Adam reached across the table and took her hands in his. You've seemed distracted this week. Are you all right? He asked. It's been a busy week. He squeezed her fingers. The wedding is 2 weeks away. If it's too much with work, it's not too much, she said, interrupting him, squeezing his hands back. I promise. I'm happy, Adam. I really am. He smiled, and she meant every word. She did. She just also couldn't explain why, 2 hours later, she was lying awake in the dark while Adam slept, and the only thing in her head was a pair of green eyes she had seen once before, a long time ago, in a different life, where she was nothing like Dr. April. She turned on her side. It was nothing. Lucien had green eyes. Lots of people had green eyes. She was tired and her brain was connecting things that had no business being connected. She closed her eyes to get some sleep, but she couldn't. Instead, she went down memory lane. She was 7 years old, standing in the bathroom crying and trying to scrub her father's blood off her hands. She was 7 years old, stitching a wound closed while her hands shook as she watched a video to help guide her. She was 7 years old, and a man with blood on his face told her, "Consider your dad alive." And he was... She opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and typed Lucien Vale into the search bar. The results were clean. Columbia University Medical School. Board certified. Publications in 2 cardiothoracic journals. A photo attached to a 2019 conference he had spoken at. She stared at the photo. He had the same face, same eyes, same jawline. 2019 was 6 years ago, but he looked exactly the same. She locked her phone and set it face down on the nightstand. She told herself there was an explanation. There was always an explanation. People aged differently, photos were misleading, she was tired and making things up, and she almost believed it. Almost. Chapter 6. The invitation sat on Lucien's desk for 3 days before he opened it. He already knew what it was. He had watched April sign them at her desk through the glass panel of her office, her head down, working through the stack with quiet efficiency. He had watched her add his name to the list before she went to print it. He picked the envelope up now and turned it over in his hands. Cream paper with gold lettering. April and Adam, 14th of March. He set it back down. He wasn't sure what he felt. That in itself was strange, because he had not felt much of anything in a very long time. Existing without feeling was simply the nature of what he was. That was his way of life. There was a knock at his office door that pulled his attention. "Come in," he said. Matthew walked in, hands in his coat pockets, with the particular energy of someone who had decided to do something and hadn't fully thought it through. "Vale," he said, nodding once. "Collins." Matthew looked around the office briefly, then looked back at him. "A few of us are going for drinks on Friday. Hospital tradition when someone new joins. Are you in?" Lucien looked at him for a moment, then asked, "Is April going?" Matthew's expression shifted just slightly. "Why?" "No reason," Lucien said. "What time on Friday?" he asked, diverting his attention. Matthew studied him the way he always did, a beat too long, like he was trying to find something. He never found anything. Lucien made sure of that. 8, Matthew said finally. "The bar is 2 blocks from here. You can ride with me if you aren't sure of the place." Lucien nodded while smiling, and Matthew left, without saying anything else. Lucien looked back at the invitation on his desk. 14th of March. He picked it up and put it in the drawer before getting back to reading the file in front of him. Friday came quickly. April had not planned to go. She had a fitting for her wedding dress in the morning, and Adam was coming over for dinner, and she was tired in the deep way that sat in her bones, not just her eyes. But Matthew had given her a look at the end of their shift and said, "You're coming," in a tone that left no room for negotiation, so she found herself walking into the bar at 8:15 in dark jeans and a loose blouse, her hair down for once. There were 6 of them in total. Matthew, 2 other doctors she had worked with for years, a newer nurse named Grace, and Lucien, who was already there when she arrived. He was sitting at the end of the table, relaxed. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows. He had a glass in front of him he hadn't touched. He looked up when she walked in, but she looked away as she greeted the others on the table, only greeting him briefly before she took the empty seat between Matthew and Grace. The conversation moved the way it always did after a long week, loud, fast, full of hospital stories that would horrify anyone who hadn't lived them. Grace was funny. Matthew was funnier. April laughed more than she expected to after a long day. "How is the wedding preparation coming up, April?" Matthew asked, shifting the topic to her. "Well, it is going well. I just need to tighten some loose ends and I am ready to get married," April said happily, and the whole table cheered except Lucien, who kept glaring at her. At some point she looked up, and Lucien was watching her. Not staring, but just watching her. She held his gaze this time. "You're not drinking," she said across the table. "I don't feel like drinking," he said. "Then why come?" April asked, her brows furrowing. He tilted his head just slightly before answering her. "For the company." Matthew glanced between them and said nothing, which for Matthew was loud. The evening ended gradually, in 2s and 3s until it was just April. Matthew and Lucien left at the table. Grace had an early shift. The other 2 doctors had families waiting. Matthew stood and stretched. "I have to go. I promised my sister I'd call her before 11. He pointed at April. "Don't stay too late." "I'm leaving now," she said. "Sure you are." "Good night, Vale. Good night, April. Extend my greetings to Adrian." He gave Lucien a look she couldn't fully read before he left. The bar was quieter now, and April picked up her glass and found it empty. "I should leave too," she said quietly. "A drain?" Lucien asked before adding, "Your fiancé." "Yes," April answered awkwardly. "Do you love him?" Lucien asked, and it made April choke on her spit. Her WW. "Of course I love him. He is the man I am getting married to in few days." "Can I ask you something?" April asked after some seconds. "You can ask," Lucien said, his lips tight in a controlled way. The photo from the 2019 Cardiothoracic Summit in Boston. She kept her voice even. You looked the same then as you do now. Good genes, he said after a pause. That's not an answer. It's the one I have, he answered before drowning his drink in one gulp and standing up from his seat. She looked at him steadily before also standing up from her seat and taking her bag. You remind me of someone, April said, stopping Lucien. I've told you that before, but it's more than that. It is like I know you, and the way you watch me. It's like you know me too. Lucien was quiet for a moment. Some things are hard to explain, he said. Try me. He looked at her, and for just a second something moved behind his eyes. Something old. Not yet, he said quietly. But I will. Soon. April should have pushed. She knew that. Instead, she called it a night. Good night, Lucien. Good night, April. She walked out into the cold night air and didn't look back, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking the whole drive home. Chapter 7. The wedding was a week away when April's father called. April was in the middle of reviewing discharge notes when her phone buzzed on her desk. She smiled when she saw the name and picked up immediately. Dad. My doctor, daughter. His voice was warm and wide, the way it always was. Are you eating? Always. You're lying. Matthew told me you skipped lunch 3 days this week. April pulled the phone from her ear and stared at it, then put it back. Matthew needs to mind his business. Besides, you are my dad. Why are you believing him? Her father laughed. It was the best sound she knew. I'm coming to the city next weekend, he said. Final fittings and all that wedding business your mother would have loved. A small pause that carried weight. I want to take you to dinner, just us two, before you become someone's wife. Dad. Just dinner, April. The last one before you change my name to your husband's own. She smiled, pressing her fingers to her eyes. Okay, just dinner. They talked for another 10 minutes about nothing that important, just about his neighbor's noisy dog, a book he was reading, whether she thought Adam's family liked him. She told him they already did. He said good because he was too old to try harder. She was still smiling when she hung up. She sat with that feeling for a moment. Her father was alive and healthy and loud and reading books and complaining about dogs and making her laugh. And she had spent years telling herself it was just how things had turned out, that he had simply gotten better. But she was 27 years old, and she remembered everything. She remembered what the body bag looked like. She remembered the blood on her hands that wouldn't come off no matter how hard she scrubbed. She remembered a man who shouldn't have been alive asking her to stitch him up, and the way he'd said her father's name back to her like it was a transaction. John Davis, consider your dad alive. She pushed the thought away and went back to her notes. Lucien was in the break room when she went to get coffee. He was standing by the window reading something on his phone. He looked up when she walked in. Your father called? He asked. She stopped. How did you know that? You have a specific look when you talk about him, and you have that look right now. She studied him. Oh, you seem to notice a lot. Occupational habit. She poured her coffee and stood by the counter. He's coming next weekend, she said. She didn't know why she was telling him. Before the wedding. That's good. Something in his voice was genuine in a way that caught her off guard. Are you coming? She asked. He looked at her for a long moment. I don't think I should, he said. It was not the answer she expected. She wasn't sure what she expected. Why? He opened his mouth, then closed it. It wouldn't be good for me to be there. What does that mean? Lucien set his phone down on the counter and looked at her directly. April. Just her name, the way he'd said it the very first day, like it meant something he wasn't going to explain. Her heart did something she didn't have a name for. She looked down at her coffee. "It's fine if you don't want to come. You don't have to come," she said, and left the break room before he could say anything else. Lucien watched her go till she was away from his sight. "I can't watch you marry another man, April. I can't," he said before pouring himself a cup of coffee. "And I also can't let him marry you." Chapter 8. The 14th of March arrived the way big days always do. Too fast and all, at once. April was up before her alarm. She lay in the silence of the hotel suite they had booked for the bridal party and stared at the ceiling and waited to feel something big. Something that matched the day. She felt nervous. She felt happy. She felt the way she always did before something she couldn't take back. She told herself that was normal. By 9 in the morning, the suite was full. Her bridesmaids moved around her in a cheerful, organized chaos. Hair, makeup, the dress, someone's heels that were a size too small but would have to do. Her cousin was crying already and hadn't stopped since she walked in. Her aunt was telling everyone to calm down while being the least calm person in the room. It was the kind of chaos she liked. April sat in the chair in front of the mirror and let them work around her. She looked at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her had her face, but seemed more beautiful than she felt. Her hair was done, makeup done, something borrowed on her wrist that had been her mother's. She was getting married today. She was happy. She was. Her father knocked on the suite door at 11 on the dot. The room went soft when he walked in, and everybody left to give them privacy. He was in his suit, a deep navy that April had helped him pick 2 weekends ago, and he looked so well, so solidly alive and present, that April felt something loosen in her chest at the sight of him. "Look at you?" he said quietly when he saw her. April stood up from the chair. "Don't you dare cry, Dad." "I am not crying." His voice cracked on the last word. She laughed and walked to him carefully, so she didn't disturb anything the makeup artist had spent an hour doing, and he held her by the arms and looked at her the way he had been looking at her whole life, like she was the best thing he had ever had. Because she was. "If your mother was here, she would have been so happy," he said. "I know. She would have cried the whole morning and blamed it on allergies." April laughed again, blinking to keep her tears from falling. "Just like someone else I know." He straightened and cleared his throat. "I am not crying." "Of course not, Dad. You are not." The ceremony was set for 2 o'clock. At 1:45, April stood at the back of the venue with her father's arm in hers and listened to the music start inside and thought, this is it. This is the moment. She was ready. She was ready to get married to the one man she loved, to the one who has been with her in all situations. She took one breath, then another, and her father's hand tightened on her arm. She looked up at him with a smile on her face. His face had changed. The color was wrong. His jaw was tight in the way it got when he was trying not to show that something was wrong. "Dad, I'm fine," he said, but his voice was thin. "You're not fine. What is it? What's wrong?" she asked, her smile falling and worry written all over her. He opened his mouth to answer her. Then his knees went. April caught him before he hit the floor. Dad, look at me." She had her hands on his face, her dress pooling around both of them on the floor, and her voice had shifted completely. Not a daughter's voice anymore, but a doctor's, clear and controlled even as her heart was slamming. "Someone, call an ambulance. Now, right now." There was noise behind her, running. Someone on a phone. Her father's eyes were still open, still on her, but glassy in a way that frightened her more than anything she had seen in any emergency room. "Stay with me," she said. "Dad, please stay with me." Tears rolled down her eyes. He tried to say something, but she couldn't hear it. The next 20 minutes were the longest of her life. The ambulance came. They wouldn't let her ride with him because someone was holding her back, saying her name, and she realized it was her maid of honor, and that she was shaking so hard she could barely stand. The guests didn't know yet. Adam didn't know yet. She was still in her wedding dress, standing in the car park, when she became aware that someone was beside her. She knew who it was before she looked. "He was fine this morning," she said. Her voice didn't sound like hers. "He was completely fine this morning. He was laughing. He was—" "April. He can't— not today. Not today of all days. He has to be okay. It is my happy day." "April." Lucien stepped in front of her, holding her shoulder. His voice was steady and low, and she hated how steadying it was. "Look at me." She looked at him. "He's going to be okay," Lucien said. "You don't know that. I do." The way he said it made her go still. "What do you mean you do?" she said slowly. "How could you possibly know?" "Because I won't let him die." Lucien held her gaze. "I never did, and I won't let him die now." The world went quiet around them, and April stared at him. "What did you just say?" He was quiet for a moment. The muscle in his jaw moved. "I think," he said quietly, "that it's time I explained some things." They sat in her car in the car park of her own wedding venue. April's bouquet was on the dashboard. Neither of them acknowledged it. "That night," Lucien said, "when you were 7, the man who came into your house, wounded." April's hands were clasped tight in her lap. She didn't say anything. "That was me," he said. The silence stretched. "I know there was something familiar about you," April said. He looked at her. "The devil?" she asked. "Are you really the devil?" "Yes." Lucien looked at his hands. "Listen, your father should have died that night. He was already gone when I found you. What I did, bringing him back, broke a rule. A divine rule, and breaking a rule has consequences." "What consequences?" "A soul tie," he said. "When you asked me to save him, it was a deal with the devil. And when I gave him life, it linked us, him to me, and by extension—" He stopped. "Me," April said. "Yes, you," he confirmed. "I have been able to feel when you are in pain since that night. I have been able to find you anywhere. I came here because the pull got stronger when you called my name in that hospital, when you were treating that patient." He paused. "You called for me, even if you didn't know that's what you were doing. Your soul wanted it." April absorbed this. "And my father," she said. "Why did this happen to him? You gave him life, right? Why is he like that now?" "Because there was a soul tie between us, and it was almost broken just now when you were about to get married." "What?" she asked in surprise. "Okay, what can I do? Do I have to make another deal with you?" "It doesn't work that way, April. We have to complete the soul tie." "Are you serious? I am about to get married," she screamed, then calmed down and spoke. "What happens to him if the tie is never completed?" Lucien was quiet. "Lucien?" "He will keep having episodes like today," he said. "The borrowed life has limits without the tie being sealed. His body knows what it was given, and it is trying to return to what it was always meant to be." April felt something cold move through her chest. "And if the tie is completed?" "He lives," Lucien said simply. "Fully. Without this happening again until something happens to either of us." "Okay," she sighed. "What does completing it require?" He looked at her then, and she already knew from the look on his face before he said it that she wasn't going to like it. "You would have to marry me," he said, "in my realm, and seal the tie properly." April looked out through the windshield at the venue, at the flowers visible through the glass doors, at the guests who were probably wondering where she was, at the life she had built carefully and chosen freely and was about to walk into. Adam, she said. What happened to him? He is as excited as I am to get married. A tear slipped from her eyes. I know, Lucien said, not understanding why she was crying. He knew humans had unnecessary emotions, but this he wanted. He wanted Adam out of her life. Why? He didn't know, but he wasn't going to let them get married. He has done nothing wrong, she continued. I know that too. She pressed her fingers to her mouth. This isn't fair, she said. No, Lucien said. It isn't. April closed her eyes. She thought about her father's face when he walked into the suite that morning. She thought about the crack in his voice when he said her mother would have been happy to be here. She thought about 20 more years of that. 30. The neighbor's dog, and the books, and the phone calls, and the laugh that was the best sound she knew. She opened her eyes. Can we get married now? She asked him, making her decision. Chapter 9. She didn't know what she expected. A door, maybe, a portal, something that looked like the beginning of something terrible. What she got was Lucien placing his hand over hers in the car, and then the world simply ending and beginning again. No sound, no wind, no moment of transition she could hold on to. 1 second, she was in a car park in San Francisco in her wedding dress with Lucien. The next, she was somewhere else entirely. The sky was the first thing she noticed. It wasn't black and it wasn't blue. It was the color of something that she had never seen before. They had never needed a name because no human had ever looked at it before. Deep and still and vast in a way that made the sky she had grown up under feel like a ceiling. There were no stars. There was light, but she couldn't find where it was coming from. The ground beneath her heels was smooth and dark, like stone that had been worn down by a very long time. There were no buildings, no walls, just a wide open space that stretched in every direction, and in the center of it, 2 chairs facing each other that had no business being there, and somehow looked like they needed to be there and have always been there. The air was cool, not cold, just different from usual, like air that had never been breathed before. April stood very still and looked at all of it. This is your realm, she said. Part of it, Lucien said beside her. The part I thought would frighten you least. She looked at him. He was watching her the way he always did, carefully, checking for something. I'm not frightened, she said. It was almost true. Surprisingly. She looked down at her clothes and found herself dressed in a long, red dress. How? She was surprised. She was wearing a white gown just a few minutes ago. I changed it on our way, Lucien said and led her to the chairs without touching her. She sat down, and he also sat across from her, close enough that she could see his face clearly in the sourceless light. He looked different here, just more like the version of him she had been seeing at the hospital was a coat he wore, and this was what was underneath. The green of his eyes was deeper. This was what he actually was. April folded her hands in her lap and waited. I need you to understand what this means before we do it, Lucien said. You explained it in the car. I explained the mechanics, he said. I want you to understand what it means. He held her gaze. Once the tie is sealed, you will feel me the way I have been feeling you. You will know when I am in pain, which is mostly likely not to happen. You will be able to find me and communicate with me. We will be bound to each other in a way that doesn't end. April absorbed this. And my father, she said, right now, tonight. Is he okay? He is stable for now. That's all right, just bonding? She asked, and Lucien hesitated. He didn't tell her the whole truth, but he didn't lie to her either. He only told her what she needed to know. For now? Lucien said. She looked out at the strange, wide sky for a moment. Then she looked back at him. You have been watching over him, she said, all these years, even before you came to San Francisco. It wasn't a question. She could see from his face that it was true. Lucien said nothing. Why? She asked. Because he was mine to protect, he said. That was the deal. I brought him back to life. It was my responsibility. Was that the only reason? He looked at her for a long moment. No, he said finally. It wasn't. He didn't say anything else, and she didn't push him. Not now. He was tired of asking too many questions. The ceremony was nothing like she imagined. No words she recognized. No vows in any language she had studied or heard. Lucien spoke quietly, and she felt the words more than she heard them. Something low and resonant that seemed to come from the ground up through the soles of her feet. He asked her to repeat after him. 3 phrases, short and simple. She didn't know what they meant. She said them anyway, each one feeling like something settling into place inside her chest, like a door closing gently in a house she hadn't known was open. Then it was still. That was all. No thunder, no light, no dramatic sign that anything had changed. Like she had thought, except that she could feel him. It was faint, like a second heartbeat that wasn't hers, sitting just beside her own, steady and deep and old. She pressed her hand to her chest without thinking. Lucien watched her do it. That's normal, he said quietly. It doesn't feel normal, she said. No, he agreed. It isn't. But you will get used to it. Neither of them moved for a moment. April looked at the sky, at the strange, sourceless light. She had woken up this morning in a hotel suite full of people who loved her, waiting to walk down an aisle toward the life she had chosen. She thought about Adam. She thought about the look on his face she hadn't even been there to see. Someone would have told him by now. Her maid of honor, or Matthew, or the silence itself when the music stopped and no one came through the doors. She pressed her fingers to her mouth. He will be all right, Lucien said. She looked at him sharply. Can you feel what I'm thinking? No, he said. But I know who you are thinking about. She looked away. I am sorry, Lucien said, for what this cost you. It was the first time he had apologized. She could tell from the way he said it that he didn't do it often, that it wasn't easy. She didn't say it was okay because it wasn't, but she nodded, and he accepted that. What happens now? She asked. You will come back with me, he said, to the human world, but you will live in my home. That is part of the seal. For how long? He was quiet for a moment. I don't know, he said honestly. Never. He thought in his mind. She appreciated that more than a clean answer would have given her. She stood from the chair and smoothed the front of her dress, her wedding dress. She almost laughed at the irony of it and didn't quite manage to. Okay, she said. Lucien stood. He looked at her for a long moment in the strange light of his world, and she looked back at him and didn't look away. I will not make this harder than it already is, he said. I want you to know that. She nodded at him. She wasn't sure yet if that made things better or worse. Take me back, she said. He held out his hand. She took it. And the world ended and began again. Chapter 10. Adam was still at the venue when she got back. Most of the guests had gone. The flowers were still there, the cake was still there, the chairs were still arranged in perfect rows facing an altar that she never got to walk down. He was sitting outside on the steps in his wedding suit with his elbows on his knees and his head down. Matthew was beside him. When Matthew saw April coming, he stood, looked at her face, and quietly went inside without saying a word, giving the both of them privacy to talk. Adam looked up and saw her. She had changed out of the red dress before Lucien brought her back. She was in her own clothes now, jeans and a shirt, ordinary and wrong for the day. Adam stared at her. "You're okay," he said. It came out like relief first, then something else moved across his face as he took in her clothes, the absence of the dress. "April, what happened? Where did you go? They told me your father collapsed and then nobody could find you. And Adam." She sat down beside him on the step, and he went quiet. She had been thinking about what to say the whole way back, and she still didn't have the right words. There were no right words for this. There was only the truth, and the truth was impossible, so she was going to have to give him the version of it she could. "My father is stable," she said. "He is going to be okay." "Okay, good. That's good." He was watching her carefully. "But?" She looked at her hands. "I can't marry you," she said. The silence that followed was the worst kind, the kind where the other person is waiting for you to say "just kidding," or "there's more to it," or anything that makes it not what it sounds like. She didn't say any of those things. "What?" Adam said. "I'm sorry." Her voice was steady, and she hated that it was. She wanted it to crack. She wanted to cry the way she felt like crying on the inside. "I am so sorry, Adam. You have done nothing wrong. You have been everything." "Then why?" he asked. His voice was quiet. That was the thing about Adam. He never raised his voice, even now, when she was wrong. April pressed her fingers to her eyes. "It's complicated," she said. "In a way I can't fully explain to you right now, but I need you to know that this is not about you. It was never about you." "Is it him?" Adam asked. "The new doctor." She looked at him. "It's not what you think," she said. "Then tell me what it is." She couldn't. She sat there and looked at the man she had said yes to and planned a life with and genuinely loved, and she couldn't give him a single sentence that would make this make sense. "I'm sorry," she said again. It was all she had. Adam looked at her for a long time. You could see him trying to find something in her face, some opening, some crack where he could push through and get to the part where this wasn't happening. He didn't find it. He nodded once, slowly. Then he stood up from the step, straightened his jacket, and looked out at the empty car park. "Take care of yourself, April," he said, and walked inside. She sat on the steps alone for a long time after that. She didn't cry until she was in the car. Then she cried for a long time. Chapter 11. Lucien's home was not what she expected. She had braced herself for something cold, something that looked like where the devil lived. Dark stone, high ceilings, dark walls. What she got was a house, a simple one. A large one, yes. Set back from the road behind iron gates in a quiet part of the city she had driven past 100 times without ever looking twice at. But a house, wood floors, windows that let in light, a kitchen that looked like it had never been used. "You live here," she said, standing in the entrance hall with her one bag at her feet. Lucien had told her she could get the rest of her things later. She had packed one bag and told herself that meant she wasn't staying long. "So do you now," he said. "Where did you live before?" He looked at her and she nodded before he could say anything. "Right," she said. He showed her to her room. It was on the second floor, large and quiet, with a window that looked out over a garden that was better kept than anything she expected from him. There was everything she needed, and nothing she hadn't asked for. "The rest of the house is yours to use," he said from the doorway. "I don't require anything from you. You can continue working at the hospital. Your life stays your life." "Except I live here," she said. "Yes, except that." She nodded and he left, and she stood in the middle of the room and looked at the ceiling and thought about the fact that she was standing in the Devil's House in San Francisco 3 days after what was supposed to be her wedding day. She almost laughed, but she didn't. She had spent the day after her supposed wedding crying and trying to get to Adam. She spent the rest of the day with her dad before he traveled back. He was angry with her. He even asked her for the reason why she called the wedding off, but she couldn't bring herself to tell him the truth. The first week was strange in the way that new things are strange before you get used to them. They moved around each other carefully, politely, like two people in a waiting room who didn't know each other well enough to talk, but had been sitting there long enough that the silence had become its own kind of conversation. He was gone most mornings before she woke up. She didn't ask where. She didn't care. He was back by evening, sometimes later. She didn't ask about that either. They had both taken a leave from work. They ate dinner at the same table twice that first week. Both times it was quiet in the way she was starting to recognize as just him. Not uncomfortable, not pointed, just Lucien, who had existed for longer than she could imagine, and had learned that silence didn't need to be filled. She filled it anyway. "Do you actually eat?" she asked the second night, watching him. "When I choose to," he said. "Do you eat flesh, meat, or—" "Just food, April." "Do you sleep?" "Sometimes." "Do you—" "April." "What?" "You can ask me things," he said. "You don't have to ration them." She looked at him. "I didn't know that was allowed." "It is." She picked up her fork. "Okay, why does your garden look like that?" A pause. "Like what?" "Like someone cares about it. Like someone goes out there and actually tends to it. Like paradise." Something shifted in his expression, small and quickly gone. "I do," he said. She stared at him. "You garden. Is that surprising?" "You are the devil. Even the devil needs something comforting to do," he said, and went back to his food. April looked at him for a moment longer than she meant to. Then she went back to hers. "Matthew called on a Thursday. Are you alive?" he asked before she could say anything. "Yes." "Are you okay?" She was standing by the window in her room watching the garden below. Lucien was out there. She hadn't realized until just now. He was crouched beside something low and green, and he wasn't wearing his coat. Just a shirt, sleeves rolled up, completely focused on whatever was in front of him. "I'm okay," she said. "April." "I'm not okay," she said, "but I will be. Is Adam all right?" A pause. "No, he is not, but he will be. He's a good man. He doesn't deserve what you did to him." "I know." She sighed in regret. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" Matthew asked. "Not yet," she said. Matthew was quiet for a moment. "Are you coming back to work?" "Monday," she said. "Tell them Monday." "Okay." Another pause. "You know you can call me, whatever it is." "I know," she said. "Thank you, Matthew." She hung up and stood at the window. Below, Lucien straightened and looked up at the sky the way he sometimes did, like he was checking something only he could read. Then he looked up at the window. She didn't step back. He held her gaze for a moment from the garden below. Then he went back to what he was doing. April stayed at the window longer than she meant to, looking at him. Chapter 12. April was eating lunch alone on a bench outside the hospital. Her first week back, still finding her footing after a short break, when a woman sat down beside her without asking. She was striking in a way that makes you look twice, and then feel strange about looking. Not beautiful, exactly. More like something that had been made very carefully and very deliberately. Features that were almost too symmetrical, and eyes that were a shade of gold April had never seen on a person before. She was smiling, like she already knew her. "You must be April," the woman said. April looked at her confused. "Do I know you?" "Not yet." She held out her hand. "My name is Seraphil, But you can call me Sarah. Everyone called me that. April shook her hand, and it was warm, warmer than hers on a cool day. Are you a new staff member? April asked, though she didn't hear of any new member. Something like that, Sarah said. She looked out at the street with an easy expression, like someone who had nowhere to be and all the time in the world to not be there. How are you settling in? Sarah asked. Into the hospital, April asked back to be sure of the question. Into your new life. April went still. Sarah smiled at her sandwich. I heard about the wedding. I'm sorry it didn't go the way you planned. Who are you? April asked carefully, already suspicious of the lady sitting with her. A friend, Sarah said simply. Or I'd like to be, if you would permit me. You look like someone who could use one right now. April studied her closely. There was something about her that was familiar in a way she couldn't place, the same way Lucien had been familiar before she understood why. But where Lucien's familiarity felt like a pull, Sarah's felt like warmth, like standing near a window with the sun coming through. Okay, April said slowly. Sarah. Sarah smiled. There. That wasn't hard. They had lunch together 3 times that week. Sarah was easy to talk to in a way April hadn't expected from a stranger. She listened well, asked the right questions and laughed at the right moments, and never pushed for more than April was willing to give. By Friday, April had told her about Adam. Not everything, but enough she can tell someone she wasn't exactly close to. She told her about the wedding and the way he had stood up and straightened his jacket and said, "Take care of yourself," without raising his voice once. He sounds like a good man, Sarah said. He is, April said. That's what made it hard. Sarah looked at her. And the person you're with now, is he a good man? April thought about that for a moment. I don't think good is the right word for him, she said. What is the right word? April looked at her coffee. I'm still figuring that out. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said carefully, Be careful with that, April. With figuring it out. What do you mean? Some things aren't meant to be figured out, Sarah said. Some things are meant to be left alone. She said it gently, with that same warm smile, like she was trying to talk about something. Are you warning me about something? April asked. Sarah tilted her head. I'm just saying that not every door needs to be opened. Some of them are closed for a reason. April looked at her for a long moment, still confused. Even more, but she didn't ask anything again. Okay, she said. She filed it away. She didn't understand it yet, but she filed it away. She didn't tell Lucien about Sarah. She didn't think he needed to know. They were not even close to that extent. He didn't need to know. Chapter 13. It started small, the way most things do. She came home from a late shift one night to find dinner on the stove, covered and warm, with no sign of Lucien anywhere, no note. He had just made it and left it there. Weird. She stood in the kitchen for a moment looking at it. Then she sat down and ate. Then it continued. It kept happening in small ways after that. Coffee ready before she came downstairs in the morning. Her car keys moved to the hook by the door when she kept leaving them on the counter. A book left on her bedside table about something she had mentioned once in passing, weeks ago, that she hadn't thought he was listening to. He never mentioned any of it, and she didn't bother to. She started noticing other things too. The way he moved through the house, like he was trying not to take up too much space, which was strange for someone who commanded entire rooms at the hospital without trying. Like here, with her, he was being careful about something. The way he asked about her patients like the way colleagues do, which he was, remembering the names she mentioned, asked about them the next day. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she wasn't paying attention. She was always paying attention, and it felt weird. You don't have to do that, she said one morning, coming downstairs to find him making breakfast. Do what? He said, startled for a second. Cook, make coffee for me and everything you have been doing all week. I want to. You know this marriage was just to save my father's life. You don't have to make it look real, April said. I know, he said, turning back to continue what he was doing. Then why? He was quiet for a moment. Because you leave too early and you don't eat enough, and it's a simple thing to do. Oh, she said, making a mouth in an O shape. She walked and stopped, standing at the door. That's very domestic and kind of you, she said. For the devil! He turned then, just slightly, and the corner of his mouth moved. Don't tell anyone, he said. She opened the door and walked out of the house, smiling. She was smiling before she realized she was doing it. The shift happened on a Wednesday evening 3 weeks in. She had a bad day, the kind where everything went wrong in small compounding ways that added up to something heavy by the time she got home. A patient she had been monitoring took a turn. A family in the waiting room screamed at her because they were frightened. Missing lunch again. Missing Matthew, who was on leave. It was just overwhelming. She came home and sat on the couch and stared at nothing. Tired. Lucien came in an hour later and saw her, but he didn't say anything. He went to the kitchen and came back with 2 cups of tea and sat at the other end of the couch and put one in front of her. She offered him a forced smile and picked it up. They sat in silence for a while. Do you want to talk about it? He asked eventually, breaking the silence. No, she said. Okay. He didn't push it any further. He just sat there, letting the silence weigh between them. She realized him sitting there was the thing she hadn't expected. She looked at him. Thank you, she said. For the tea. It's just tea, he said. I know, she said. Thank you anyway. He looked at her then. Really looked at her, the way he did sometimes, with that full, careful attention. And she looked back and didn't look away, and something passed between them that she didn't have a name for yet. She was starting to think she would need one soon. Chapter 14. It was a Saturday when he told her. April was in the garden. She had started going out there on weekends without fully deciding to. She would just wander out with her coffee and sit on the low stone bench near the far wall while the morning was still quiet. It had become a habit before she noticed it was one. Lucien found her there, and he sat down beside her on the bench without asking. She moved over slightly to give him room. Neither of them said anything to each other. It was the kind of silence she had gotten used to with him. Not empty, just silence, as it is. Can I ask you something? She said, breaking the silence. Yes. Do you feel it too? She kept her eyes on the garden. The tie. On your end. He was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. What does it feel like? For you? Like knowing, he said. Where you are. Whether you're okay. When something is wrong before you say it. Pause. It has always felt like that, even before you knew what it was. April turned her coffee cup in her hands. That whole time? She asked. At the hospital. You already knew everything about me. Not everything, he said. But enough. She nodded slowly. She had suspected as much. It still landed differently, hearing it being said plainly. Is that why you came? She asked. Just because the pull got stronger? He didn't answer immediately. She looked at him. His jaw was tight in the way it got when he was deciding something. She had learned that about him too in the weeks of living in the same house. The small sign someone would miss. The things he did when he couldn't find his words. No, he said finally. Then why? He looked at her then, and she held his gaze and waited. Because I wanted to see you, he said. That was the truth of it. The pull was the reason I could, but wanting to, that was mine. The garden was now very Quiet. April looked back at the flowers. Lucien, I know what this is, he said before she could finish. I know what you came here for, and I know it wasn't for me. I am not asking you for anything. He stopped. I needed you to know that it wasn't only the tie, that it has not been only the tie for a long time. April sat with the thought on her mind. She thought about the coffee, the keys on the hook, the book on her nightstand, the tea on a Wednesday when she couldn't speak. She thought about the way he said her name that first day in her office, like it meant something he already understood. She thought about Sarah's voice. Not every door needs to be opened. I don't know what I feel, she said honestly. I'm not going to tell you something that isn't true. I know, he said. I am not asking you to. But, she said, and stopped. He waited. I don't hate it here, she said quietly. I want you to know that. Whatever else is true, I don't hate it here. Lucien looked at her for a long moment. Something in his face changed. That's enough, he said. For now, that's enough. They sat in the garden until the morning was gone. Neither of them moved to leave. Chapter 15. Few passed by, and they both spent time together. At first, it was just silence between them, a comfortable one then, transitioned to talk about their day in the hospital, the complications they face at work, and little details about what they feel about something. Sparks and emotions were quick to fly after Lucien initiated his first kiss with her. April didn't pull back, nor kiss him back. She just let it stay, battling with her feelings. They began going to work together, spent every free time with each other, telling personal things, stealing kisses, and sharing romantic moments. It was one of the best moments of April's life. She saw the devil in a different life and realized the devil is not always evil. He can be the best angel you would know. After all, he is a fallen angel. She found out on a Thursday morning. She had suspected for almost 2 weeks, but she was a doctor, and doctors, she had learned, were the worst at applying their own knowledge to themselves. She had been too tired to examine it, too busy looking at everything around her to look at what was happening inside of her. But Thursday morning, she stood in the hospital bathroom with a test in her hand and stared at the result and stood there for a very long time. Positive. She sat down on the closed lid of the toilet seat and pressed both hands over her mouth. A baby. His baby. The devil's child was growing inside her while she had been figuring out what to call what she felt for him. She almost laughed, but she didn't. She sat there for 10 minutes trying to process everything and think. Then she washed her hands, straightened her coat, and walked back out onto the ward like nothing had happened because there were patients waiting, and she was still a doctor regardless of everything else. She got through the whole day like that. Compartmentalizing was a skill she had spent years developing, and she used every part of it. By 5 o'clock, she had decided what to do. She was going to tell him. Tonight. She was going to go home and tell him, and whatever came after that, they would figure out together. That was the only thing that made sense. She was almost at her car in the parking area when her phone rang. It was her father. She picked up smiling. Dad. April, I have been calling since afternoon. Sorry, it was a long shift. I'm heading home now. Okay. I just wanted to hear your voice. You haven't spoken to your old man lately. You act and sound different lately. She unlocked her car. Do I? He asked, holding her phone with her shoulder against her ear while opening the door. Yes. Are you happy, April? She stopped with her hands on the door. She thought about the time she spent with Lucien. She thought about how Lucien made her feel, and their intimacy. She thought about what he had said, and what she hadn't said back. I think I'm getting there, Dad, she said. Her father was quiet for a moment before he said, Good. That's all I want. I know, Dad. Drive safe. I will, she said, and got in the car, still smiling. She set her phone on the passenger seat and pulled out of the hospital car park and turned toward home. She was thinking about how to say it, what words to use, whether to just say it plainly the way she said most things, or whether this was the kind of thing that needed a lead-up. She was still thinking about it when the other car ran the red light. She didn't see it until it was already happening. The impact came from the left, hard and sudden and loud, and then the world tilted, and there was glass and the sound of metal, and then nothing. Just nothing. Quiet. Pain. Her phone was on the floor, the screen was cracked, her father's name was still on it. Outside, someone was already calling for help. She didn't hear it. She couldn't hear anything. Chapter 16. He felt it before anyone called him. He was in the middle of a conversation he no longer remembers when it hit him, sharp and sudden through the tie, like something tearing at the edges. Pain. Hers. Then silence where she should have been. He was already moving before the thought finished forming. He didn't even look at the person he was talking to. His only concern was April. He found her at the hospital, not the one she worked at, a different one, closer to where it happened. She was in surgery by the time he got there, and a nurse he didn't know was telling him to wait in the family room, and he stood in the corridor instead and felt the tie pull thin and fragile in his chest like thread about to snap. He had never been afraid of anything in his life. He was afraid now. For the first time. He was scared. Matthew arrived 20 minutes later after he called him, still in his coat and his face tight. "What happened?" he asked Lucien immediately after he saw him. "A car ran a red light," Lucien said. His voice was even. He had made it even, but he wasn't feeling so. Matthew looked at him. Whatever he saw in Lucien's face made him stop asking questions and pat his shoulder as a sign of reassurance that she was going to be fine. Matthew knows she is a fighter. They waited in silence, and an hour in, Seraphil walked through the door. Lucien saw her and went still immediately. Matthew looked between them. "Do you two know each other?" Neither of them answered him. Sarah looked at Lucien with those gold eyes, and the expression on her face was not unkind. That was the worst part. She wasn't here to punish him. She was here because this was simply what was. "Walk with me," she said, and he followed her to the end of the corridor, away from Matthew. "How bad is she?" he asked. "Bad," she said simply. "She is holding on, but her body has been through too much, and the soul tie is straining under it. She needs more than the surgeons can give her." "Then I will give it to her," he said. "The same way I gave her father." "You cannot," Sarah said. "Not this time. The order will not permit it twice, not without a cost." "Name the cost." Sarah looked at him steadily. "You know what it is. You have always known this was the risk of staying." He was quiet. "You go back," she said, "to where you belong. You leave this world, leave the tie open so it sustains her, and she lives. The child lives. The order is restored." A pause. "Or you stay, and she does not survive the night." "Child?" Lucien asked in confusion. "Yes, child," she nodded. "She is bearing your child." Hearing those words almost brought tears to his eyes. He was going to be a father. She was going to have a child with April, the woman he loves, the woman he had fallen in love with before she even knew him. Then the thought of leaving them broke him, and his smile fell. The corridor suddenly felt too quiet for him. Lucien looked at the door of the room they had taken her into. He talked about April, every moment he experienced with her, every love he showed her, and every kind gesture she showed her. He thought about the child he had not known about until this moment, and would not hold for a very long time. "Does she know about the baby?" he asked. "Yes." "She just found out," Sarah said quietly. "Will you tell her, when she wakes, that I—" He stopped, unable to complete his sentence. "I will tell her," Sarah said, and he nodded once. "He has to do it. He has to return back to hell, for her and his baby. I will send one of my demons," he said, "to watch over her and the child." "You don't have to. I will take care of them. She is carrying a divine being. There is always protection on her." Lucien wanted to argue with her, but he knew he had to do what he needed to do. He looked at the door one last time before he turned away from it. "Tell her," he started. "Lucien." He stopped. "She knows," Sarah said gently. He didn't say anything else. He walked out of the door at the end of the corridor, and the world ended and began again without her in it. And April's vitals on the monitor down the hall began to beep, and held. It became stable. Chapter 17. 9 months passed slowly. It was a long time. Long enough to grieve someone who isn't dead. Long enough to learn how to carry something heavy without it breaking you, because breaking wasn't an option when there was a person growing inside you who was going to need you to be whole. April learned a lot of things in 9 months. She learned who Sarah was. She also learned that Sarah stayed, not at the hospital, not officially, but she was always nearby in the way that mattered. She showed up on hard evenings and sat with April the way Lucien used to sit with her, quietly, without requiring anything. She learned that Matthew, when told the truth, did not run. He sat at her kitchen table for a long time and said nothing, and then said, "Okay," and then said, "What do you need?" And that was that. She learned that her father, who still didn't know everything, knew enough. He moved to the city for the last 2 months to take care of her. He slept in the guest room and drove her to appointments and argued with her about what to name the baby and lost every argument. She learned that the house still felt like Lucien even with him gone. The garden kept growing. She didn't know how because Lucien was the one who took care of it, but she didn't ask. She had no one to ask. She learned that loving someone and losing them in the same season was not something you got over. You just got used to carrying it. She realized she loved him, but he was gone when she woke up, and she learned somewhere in the 7th month that she was angrier at him than she had let herself be, that she had needed more time, that she had things to say that she hadn't said yet and now couldn't. She saved them up anyway, just in case. Case of what? She doesn't know yet. On a Tuesday, her labor started. It was fast and painful, and her father held one hand and Sarah held the other, and Matthew paced outside the door because he had said he was fine, and then immediately was not fine. April was not afraid. She was just exhausted and was in pain, and she was the most clear-headed she had been in 9 months because this was the thing she had been moving toward, and she was ready. When he came loudly, the kind of cry that fills a room and leaves no space for anything else. The midwife placed him on her chest, and April looked down at her son and everything she had been carrying. The grief and the anger and the long, quiet months. All of it moved aside to make room for this. He had her nose and his father's eyes, beautiful set of green eyes, already open, even though slightly, already looking at her like he recognized her. "Hello," she said quietly. "I have been waiting for you." Her father was crying in the corner and not pretending otherwise. Sarah was smiling with something in her eyes that looked like it was more than just happiness, like relief, like something that had been waiting a long time to resolve itself. April didn't notice any of it. She only had eyes for her son, her beautiful son. It was 3 in the morning when the room was quiet. Her father was asleep in the chair, Sarah had stepped out. Matthew had gone home 2 hours ago after holding the baby for longer than anyone expected him to. April was awake. Her son was asleep on her chest, warm and small and impossibly real, and she was staring at him, happy, at the bundle of joy and happiness she brought to life. The room was still and at peace until it wasn't. She felt it first, through the tie. That second heartbeat she had lived with for almost a year, always faint, always there at the edge of her own. It shifted, grew stronger, close. Then she looked up, and there he was. Lucien was standing in the doorway, staring at her. He looked the same. Of course he will look the same. He always looked the same. But there was something different about the way he was standing. Less composed than usual, like he had moved fast to get here and hadn't quite settled yet. His eyes stayed on her for a while, before moving down to the baby on her chest. He didn't move for a moment. He just stood there in the doorway and looked at his son for the first time, and April watched his face do something she had never seen it do before. "You came back," she said. Her voice was quiet, so she didn't wake the baby and her dad. "Yes," he said. "How? Why?" "He was born," Lucien said simply. "The tie completed itself. The order couldn't hold it." He paused. "I came as soon as I could." April looked at him for a long moment. She had saved up things to say, months of them. The anger and the questions and everything she hadn't gotten to tell him before the accident took the chance away. She looked down at her son instead. "Come and meet him," she said. Lucien crossed the room in a flash, like he had wanted to hear those words forever. He sat in the chair beside the bed, and April carefully placed the baby into his arms and watched Lucien hold his son for the first time. He held him like he was the most important thing he had ever been trusted with, which he was. The baby stirred, blinked, and looked up at his father with those green eyes. Lucien looked back at him and said nothing for a long time. Then he looked up at April. "What is his name?" he asked. April almost smiled. "I've been waiting for you to help me decide that," she said. Something shifted in his face, and a smile crossed his face. "I have a few ideas," he said. "What is it?" she asked. "Azrael Adrain Vale,"